So, Diablo 4 beta. What do I think? I think this video is done in one take, but there's so many things I want to cover, but I want to do it in a short period of time. So the first thing I want to cover, a little bit about me. I've probably put about 1,000 hours in the Diablo 3 in total, over Reaper of Souls and the original game that came out in 2013. I put about 500-600 hours in the Path of Exile, about 70-80 hours in the last epoch. So I'd like to think I do have a little bit of experience in this genre. Oh, and I've also played a bit of Diablo 2. And back in the day, I don't even remember the Marvel games that were very similar to an ARPG. I played them too. And I just want to point out some things and some hot takes that I've seen from other YouTubers, particularly Diablo 2 and Path of Exile, like full-timers from them in particular, right? One of the main things I've seen is like this weird scrutiny of the beta. At the end of the day, it's a beta. It only goes up to level 25. It's like judging Path of Exile or even Diablo 3 off level 25. Diablo 3 is not the best example because it isn't very complex in terms of the skills, but I'm just saying there's a lot more to the game than that. At level 25, the game is completely different to when you're end game, max level, etc. Like, completely different. The truth is, we don't have a clue. We don't have a clue where the game is really going to go. But the problem I have is people are having these weird, they're dissecting the game to a granular level and being like, well, this doesn't look too good, or, the world boss, you can stand 2 screens away and use the sorcerer is overpowered, and it's a beta and it's early game. And I can promise you now, the Barbarian, for example, will be very strong late game. Very strong. I'm going to touch on the complexity now of Diablo 4 versus like Path of Exile, etc. The argument I keep seeing is, well, in Path of Exile, there's this huge skill tree and there's this and there's that. I love Path of Exile. I do. But it doesn't matter how much complexity there is in that game. You watch top-end builds doing mapping, like it's just clear speed, and then the whole screen ignites and everyone's dead. Pretty much. Don't get me wrong, you get the odd build that is different to play, a bit unique, but most of the time, it's a guy running to the left, doing his skill, everything's dead. Run to your right, do his skill, everything dead. Spam my auras, do his skill, everything dead. That is the end game of Path of Exile with meta builds. There's not, people say there's loads of diversity. On paper there is, but when you're watching it, there's not. There really isn't. The only difference is melee versus projectile, really. And it's literally the same thing. They'll be running, they'll be very fast, they'll have a lot of movement speed, obviously with the potions. And then it'll just be spam, 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 everything's dead, full screen wiped, next area, spam, 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 everything's dead, full screen wiped, right? I don't see this argument of complexity means something is better, because it doesn't. Complexity doesn't equal quality. Now, I will take on board that, for example, Diablo 3 is too simple, 100%, and it's way too dependent on items. You get a sword that multiplies everything. Like, you get a sword that gives you 10,000% damage on a certain skill when this certain skill activates, and it's ridiculous. It's a power fantasy that has no depth in Diablo 3. Even though I've put about 1,000 hours into the game, because I found it fun, especially after Reaper of Souls, it's still, I can understand that it's not as good as Path of Exile. I will say that Path of Exile is better than Diablo 3. But what I will say, Diablo 4 right now, in terms of bare bones, what is there, blueprint, is far ahead of where Path of Exile was when it released. And I mean, like, not when it released, but when it released against the other contemporaries of its genre. So when Path of Exile released in 2013, I believe, how good was it versus, your Diablo or your Diablo 2? Do you know what I mean? Diablo 4 right now versus everything else in the market has the potential to be the best ARPG. I don't see how it doesn't. It really does. First of all, the first thing that makes it a step above is just the feel of the game. The combat, Everything feels punchy. The flow of combat, you know, it feels like you actually have to think about what you're doing. You know, you're not just spamming 5 auras, running full screen wipe, running full screen wipe. You know, I was playing as the bar, and everyone says about the level scaling. I can see the merits of both arguments, that you don't feel like you're powerful if you're not wiping everything out, that's a low level, or you feel like you're grinding, but at least the combat's more engaging that way. So if you, like, on Diablo 4, for me, the Barbarian didn't feel very good till about level 15, level 16, and then it started to feel good. The Sorcerer feels good from the start. The Rogue feels good. Everything's punchy. Everything's accurate. When you cast something, it happens. The monsters have very good attack patterns that are very well telegraphed. And it just feels good. It's gory, it's visceral, and it feels like really good. Path of Exile is not there yet on that level when it comes to the feel of combat. If everything feels a bit, it's not as reactive. Things don't feel as punchy. You know, it doesn't feel as physical. That's the right way to put it. The last epoch, probably somewhere between Diablo 4 and Path of Exile in terms of combat feel. But Path of Exile in particular does not feel as good to play. It's not as good to play, to be honest. And that's only level 25 of the beta. Like, for example, I feel like on Diablo 4, you actually have to like crowd control mobs just in case you get overrun. I mean, I'm talking about World Tier 2 here. I didn't play it on Tier 1. I put about 35 hours in over the 3 characters over the weekend. I did put about 35 hours in. But yeah, I would say Tier 2 felt about right. Tier 1 might be a bit easy, but Tier 2 felt about right. And the second point I'm gonna talk about here is the itemization and complexity. People are already saying, oh yeah, you know, you get loads of legendaries and all this. First of all, legendaries are not the rarest item drop you can get now. So legendaries are basically rares in Diablo 2, or sorry, Diablo 3. You can now get uniques, which are one above legendaries, which don't drop to level 50, and they have a unique affix to them that can be build changing according to Blizzard. So there can be like your crazy ones that change your skill completely, or this activates when you get hit off this, etc. And then you take into account the specific class like specializations they have, and we're not even talking about the Paragon board here. We're talking about this just itemization really. But for example, the Barbarian can have 4 weapons equipped, right? Can you imagine if the Barbarian has 4 uniques equipped? I'm pretty sure it's 4 affixes and then 1 unique affix per weapon. So you telling me, and then we're not including gems, we're not including the Paragon board, we're not including endgame skill tree either, or sigils, we're not including sigils either. Are you telling me that is not going to be unbelievably complex? I'm actually more worried that they're not going to be able to balance that. That is going to be hella complex. That's just the Barbarian. And you got the Druid with his specialization where he has some of the wildlife, can interact with some of the wildlife in interesting ways. The Sorcerer has one where she completely changes a skill. Like, and we're not talking about this huge Paragon board you get on at level 50. And the Paragon board this time isn't like what it was in Diablo 3 where it's plus 1% of this, or you get more damage resist to this. It's actually palpable unique perks to an extent. Not all of them, but for the most part, they're pretty like palpable what you'd need for your build. So I don't get this argument for complexity. It's way more complex in Diablo 2, and it's way more complex in Diablo 3. Way more, and I would argue that it's probably more complex in the last epoch. It's not more complex in Path of Exile. It's not, but complexity doesn't always mean good. I'm not saying it isn't good in the way of Path of Exile, but it doesn't always mean it's good. But I don't get this argument that it's going to be simple. It's definitely not going to be simple. Definitely not. Like I said, you haven't even included any of the high difficulties, you know, PvP as well on top of that, with all the classes, with all the class specializations, with all the different items, and then the unique items, and then you got your Paragon board. You know what I mean? And then you got your sigils. Like, all these things alter things on your build and give you choice. So I don't understand where this complexity argument comes from. Now, another point, in my opinion, which Diablo 3, in this one, it's a flawless victory. All around, it's not even close. Diablo 4's graphics, sound design, music, and world absolutely annihilates anything else on ARPG-wise on the market. It's not even close. Not even close. PoE 2, I'm not saying it isn't going to be a better game. It might be a better game, but it will not have better graphics, better story, or better attention to detail in the world. I mean, you're walking about on a snowy night and it's got this soundtrack in the background that's atmospheric, and it just makes you feel like, you know, like alone. I know it's not, you're not a lone wanderer. You do see people out in the world, but it makes you feel like you're on your own little voyage. The graphics look like something out of a gothic novel. That's what they look like, and it's incredible. The graphics on the monsters, the graphics on your character as well, like the armors, things like that, of what we've seen so far, and we haven't even seen anything really. Incredible. That's one of the most positive things about this beta for me, was it feels like what Diablo 2 in terms of visuals wanted to be at that time, but it couldn't, obviously, with limitations with the hardware, etc. And it was 2000, the year 2000, June, that Diablo 2 came out. So that's a flawless victory for Diablo, right? Diablo 4. Then we get the meta. Everyone's like, well, you know, sorcerers the meta, or, you know, barbarians weak. We have no clue. It's level 25. You're literally 25% into the game in terms of leveling. We have no clue. We haven't seen the Paragon boards, haven't seen any of the proper... I mean, there's always overpowered builds in ARPGs. That's the way every ARPG is. And there'll be overpowered weapons for each character, 100%. But we haven't seen none of them yet. Nowhere near. We haven't even seen a unique. So that one, I just don't even... How can you comment on that? Same as the technical issues of the beta, the queue times, and the, you know, getting kicked out for the memory leak, for example. If you have your textures on high versus medium, you don't have enough VRAM. You know, don't get me wrong, yeah, frustrating. I had to queue for around about 2.5 hours on the opening beta day. I got in, it took me an hour, got kicked, 101 minutes, got in, got kicked again, and I had to wait 40 minutes, right? But it is a beta. It's a beta test. And on top of all these points I'm bringing up, these are always subject to change. This beta we're playing could be old code. This could be from, you know, 3 months ago. We don't know. Truthfully, we don't know nowhere near enough about the game to make these sort of assertions or judgments about the game. Or we can go off what we've played. And in my opinion, what we can play right now, the first act is way better than the first act of Path of Exile or the first act of Last Epoch. Far better. It just is. And people who are denying that are just people in denial who don't want to accept that Blizzard, the shitbag company that they are, because let's be honest, they are a shitbag company, can make genre-defining or great games. They can. They've done it. World of Warcraft, Diablo 2, Overwatch 1. Like, they do make, from time to time, unbelievable games. Like, unbelievable. And that brings me onto my verdict right now for the beta. So I'm going to rate it on 2 ways. I'm going to say right now, and then what I think it could be with, you know, if it turns out that things are quite well balanced, there is that depth and itemization, which I personally think there is going to be, and which it appears to be based on of what we can see with the Paragon board, you know, the character specializations, etc., and the talent tree, sigils, the world itself. You know, there is a few negatives I would say about the beta. Like, I do agree with the dungeon layout. Not the dungeon visuals, because the dungeon visuals are pretty stunning for the most part. Like, every dungeon I went in, you know, one of them was like a fleshy hell, and I was like, this is so cool. I don't like the repetitive nature of backtracking. I don't like backtracking in games, really, at all. So, hopefully that will be sort of fixed. I don't like people in the overworld, like MMOE, I'll be honest, that's another negative point for me. I wish I could do a bit like Path of Exile, where it's like a single player game, but then when I go to a town, I can see other players in the town. I would prefer that personally. And obviously there is some technical issues, like the crashing, you know, some stuttering here and there. But those are things that I think can get ironed out. But I honestly think if Blizzard don't microtransaction the fuck out of this game and don't fuck it up, right? This could be the best ARPG ever. I genuinely believe that. This could be a 10 out of 10. This could have somewhere complexity in between Diablo 3 and Path of Exile, but closer to Path of Exile. Not as complex, but closer. Like, it's definitely way more complex than Diablo 3. And then have everything else that we wanted. Unbelievable combat, world, quest design, all these things. Unbelievable. With unbelievable combat and unbelievable complexity in builds. Do you know what I mean? This could be the ARPG, I think. I think Blizzard could be back. If they don't fuck it up, that is. So right now, for me, the beta is around about an 8, 7.5. Probably an 8. It's an 8. But I generally believe that if all these assertions I'm making personally, like I said, it's only a beta, I could be wrong. I think it could be a 10, 9.5. I think this could be Blizzard's sort of comeback. They had a really good time with Dragonflight. Really well received. I don't play WoW, but I know it's very well received and a lot of people liked it. And I think because of all the Bobby Kotick shit and all the bad press surrounding their company, I feel like this might be good. I honestly do. Let me know what you think, because I generally think we're onto a winner here. And I think in 6 months' time or a year's time, when the game's being updated and balanced correctly and all these things, because you got to remember, Path of Exile at launch was a shit show. Yeah, it had complexity, but it was a shit show. Diablo 3 at launch, shit show. Most of these games are nowhere near their final form at launch. But if this is the starting form for Diablo 4, it's the best out of any of them. So, that's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments.